Hi everybody, it's me, Blueberry. Why is it so spooky in here? Oh, it's pretty spooky. Yeah, I'm a ghost, but ghosts can get scared too sometimes. And it's pretty spooky in here. Oh, wait a minute. I know why it's so spooky. It's so spooky in here because this is Edwin Canistraci's Black Sabbath Halloween special. Rock and roll! Cocaine! Woo! Edwin Canistraci here. Thank you, Blueberry, for that introduction. Back in LA, and it's Halloween time. And what better time than Halloween time to talk about Black Sabbath? Enjoying a Miller Lite. There you go. You've seen this beer before. You might have even drank it before. Anyway, we're doing Black Sabbath. I'm just going to do the Ozzy years. Just going to try to keep this short. I don't want it too long. Some of my videos get a little too crazy. They get a little too long, a little too epic. Sometimes it's fun, but sometimes you just want a shorter video. So I'm going to just do the Ozzy years, and then at some point later down the line, I'll do part 2, which will be the Dio stuff and Tony Martin stuff, and I'll do all that stuff later. So right now, just Ozzy, the Ozzy years, 70s, the classic Sabbath lineup. You know, that's right, Ozzy Osbourne, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and my man Bill Ward. Love Bill Ward. Anyway, like most drummers, the most underrated member of the band, in my opinion. But they're all great. Love them. It's a perfect band. Those four guys, how can you lose? They did this little thing back in the very early 70s, 1970. Doesn't get any earlier 70s than that. They did this thing. They created a genre of music. That's right. They created heavy metal. We all know that. That's what Black Sabbath's famous for. They're famous for creating heavy metal. They invented it. They have a patent. They invented heavy metal. Sabbath created it. Judas Priest perfected it. And everyone else is following. That's how I see it anyway. And I'll be honest, when I was a teenager and I was getting into heavy metal music and hard rock music and thrash and a little bit after that grunge when I was in high school, I was at best a casual Sabbath fan. You know, my older brother, he was more of a hair metal guy and just like 80s metal. So, you know, and my parents didn't like hard rock music really at all. They were more like pop people and R&B people. They liked to dance. So I didn't have that person kind of educating me on Black Sabbath. I did have a buddy of mine, Adam Alexander. I'm going to give a shout out to Adam Alexander. He, to his credit, he was hip to the Sabbath thing. This is like the early 90s. And he was trying to get me into Sabbath, and he made me a mixtape. It was a damn good mixtape, too, especially in retrospect. It had like songs like Cornucopia on it and Snowblind. And I was like, I liked it. And I thought, yeah, this is cool stuff. But, you know, I think part of the problem was that this was like a cassette. It was like a copy of a copy. It was like a cassette recorded from another cassette. Like, you know, remember the dual cassette things, the tape deck, where you put the one cassette on one side and then the cassette on the other, and you played and then you record it, and it was like that, you know. So it was really low quality. And Sabbath, you know, I think something gets lost, especially years later when I listened to the remasters. I was like, whoa, man, you know, there's so much I missed by this old crappy little cassette mixtape that my buddy made. And, you know, I listened to it and I thought it was cool, but, you know, I wasn't like blown away by it. But I also think it was just because I was younger, and I said this about Judas Priest too, that it took me a few years to acquire a taste for that. It kind of just took me a few years to acquire a taste for that earlier, sludgier, kind of 70s style heavy metal. And once I did, and in fact, actually, the funny thing about Sabbath is, I think I got into them, if I recall, it was like more like the late 90s, where I was living in New York. I was in a funk band. I was a lead singer and bassist for a funk band. And I was listening mainly a lot of funk and jazz at that point. And I was not listening to as much heavy metal as I was listening to back in junior high and high school. I was kind of, in my opinion, kind of evolving and moving on. And I do love a lot of that funk music and that stuff today. But, I've also embraced a lot of the music I loved when I was younger. I mean, I just love music across the board. I would say heavy metal and hard rock is my favorite kind of music. But funk and R&B, that comes kind of, that's probably like in third place. Anyway, so during this period, I was like very, very into Miles Davis and Funkadelic and James Brown and stuff. And this was actually when I started to really get into Sabbath, which is interesting. I think maybe it was because of like Bill Ward's drumming, and I started to appreciate some of these other elements that they were bringing. And I just, in general, was just my taste was getting a little more sophisticated. I started to appreciate Sabbath more than I did back when I was a punk ass teenager. And I knew like Ozzy, obviously he was a big star, and I had No More Tears, that album, which I liked but didn't love. I loved some songs on it, but that was not the album I think I should have first listened to get into Ozzy Osbourne, which is why I didn't really go back. A couple years later, I got Tribute, the Randy Rhoads Tribute album, that live album, and that was great, and I really liked that, but that was pretty much it. I had those two Ozzy albums and this old mixtape of Black Sabbath, and that's pretty much it. So it wasn't until the late 90s that I took this detour and from the funk and jazz and started listening to Black Sabbath, and it was especially Volume 4 I got very into, and I was like, wow, this is some really great stuff. And then a few years after that, the remasters came out. Few years after that even, I remember this box set. Oh my God, the Ozzy years, the greatest box set ever, in my opinion. The sound quality is amazing. And from that point, I got really into it. Even, I got the Dio stuff and a couple of the other albums after that. I got all the Ozzy solo stuff. And I got really, really deep into Sabbath. And I felt like a punk ass for not, well, at least I thought my young self was a punk ass. My older self was cool. But my young self was a punk ass for not getting into Sabbath sooner, because Sabbath is one of the greatest bands ever. And even though I mainly love the Ozzy Era and the first two Dio records and Born Again, although I will talk about those albums in part 2. Just for those albums alone, that's enough to make them break my top 10 and be one of my favorite bands of all time. You can't lose with the first 6 Sabbath albums. And we're going to talk about them chronologically. I'm not going to do a countdown, but at the end I will rank them. But right now we're just going to do them chronologically. I think a lot of the people watching this video are probably already pretty hip to these albums, but we're going to talk about them. So let's have a drink and let's talk some Sabbath. How sweet it isn't. That's something my father used to say. My father used to take a drink and go, how sweet it isn't. Anyway, so here we go. The first Black Sabbath album, which for some reason they decided they'd call Black Sabbath. It's called Black Sabbath, of course, inspired by the Mario Bava Italian horror masterpiece starring Boris Karloff. Great goddamn movie, you should see it. I love Italian horror movie. Oh, what do you know? Right here, check it out. Tenebrae, check that shit out. Argento, Bava, Fulci, love all those guys. And Mario Bava's Black Sabbath is a masterpiece. I love it. It was like the Creep Show before Creep Show back in the early 60s. And that inspired them. I think it was Geezer, if I was the guy that was really into the horror movie stuff. And Geezer wrote a lot of their lyrics. He's a cool dude. I mean, his name was Geezer. How could he not be cool? This first album, they invented heavy metal. I'd say, Sabbath for the most part I would say were a hard rock band for the most part. But they invented heavy metal, and there were certain key songs that obviously were the blueprint for various kinds of metal. And with the song, the title track, Black Sabbath, they not only created heavy metal, but they also created a subgenre. They created a subgenre at the same time, which was doom metal. Doom metal. Let me tell you something about all these subgenres, okay? Especially to you younger kids out there that all get caught up in your subgenres. And Wikipedia, it's like a goddamn heritage tree, and it's like elemental table or some shit like that. Let me tell you something. When I was in high school, we called it was like heavy metal, hair metal, and thrash. That was about it. All these other names for things, like even like power metal and stuff, like none of us used that terminology. It wasn't until maybe into the mid and late 90s, and with the with the internet, suddenly everyone was breaking shit up into these little subgenres, and we didn't do that so much. And I know like the generation even before me, they just called it all heavy metal. They didn't even break it up as much as we did. But it seems like every generation breaks that shit up more and more and more. Just relax, dudes. It's all rock and roll. Anyway, that being said, if you want to call doom metal a subgenre, well, Black Sabbath's a doom metal song. And it's doomy and it's slow and it's evil. Got rain, sound effect. This has all been copied many times later. It's an amazing song. It's a revolutionary song. The way it kicks in and Ozzy's singing about Satan and shit. It's awesome. How could you not love that song? The Wizard, awesome, bluesy kind of hard rock tune. It's got a harmonica on it. That's the thing. Sabbath, were kind of bridging 60s rock into 70s heavy metal. What people would consider heavy metal, definitely in the 70s. And The Wizard's great. Love that song. Behind the Wall of Sleep, probably my favorite song on the album. I just love how it comes in, and the guitar chords, which are a little jazzy and kind of stoner. That's another thing. There's another subgenre, stoner metal or stoner rock, and well, this is all stoner shit all throughout, and that's great. NIB, there's debate on what NIB stands for. Some say Nativity in Black, that's sinister. That makes sense. But some people say it's Geezer's little goatee thing, which the British slang was nib. That's a nib. At least that's the story. That's the story I read. And but who knows? No one knows. All I know is that NIB is a song. It's a love song about how Satan wants to love a lady, and he's just like, hey, just because I'm Satan, give a brother a chance. And it's a beautiful song. It's a catchy song. It's awesome. You got that, basically bass solo that's in between the Wall of Sleep and NIB, Geezer's bass solo. That's badass. I used to play bass, so I think that's another reason why even during a period where I was more into funk, I can kind of get into Sabbath was Geezer. Geezer did all this funky, cool shit on the bass, and I really love that shit. And Sleeping Village, Warning, it's all great. Wicked World, they do that cover, Evil Woman, and it's great. It's one of my favorite Sabbath albums. It's grown on me a lot, actually, over the years. When I was younger, I liked it, but it wasn't one of my favorite Sabbath albums. And there are a few Sabbath albums I do prefer, but I love this album, and my appreciation of it has only grown more and more over the years. And I find that this is an album, everyone kind of cites it historically as an important album, and this is like the first heavy metal album, but I don't think it gets enough love. I feel like this is just a really perfect record. Every track's great. The way it flows, it's kind of jammy, and I just love it. I love the atmosphere. I love that cover. It's creepy. It's creepy as all fuck. Look at that. I love it. And I love the vibe. And that's the thing. I'm a big fan of horror movies, and I love British horror movies as well as the Italian horror movies. Actually, the British ones are probably my favorites. I love those 60s Hammer films, the Hammer horror films, and that pastoral horror films like a Witchfinder General and shit like that. And I like stuff like The Wicker Man, and I like that vibe. I like that vibe of that pastoral kind of folky horror from the late 60s, early 70s. And this album cover captures that vibe, and the music captures that vibe. It's like you wandered into some some field in the Middle Ages, and they're burning witches and shit, and people are putting curses on you. And I love that vibe. I think it's sexy. I like it. And I love this album. It's a masterpiece. And if you don't get into its groove, man, listen to it again with all the shit I just said and think about it that way. And maybe the album will pop for you a little bit more. It's a masterpiece. I love it. And now we're going to talk about, I guess technically this is their biggest album. Here we go. Also in 1970. Whoa! 2 albums in one goddamn year. Goddamn. That's how people rolled back then. They weren't fucking around. They said, hey, let's rock and roll. Let's knock out some records. Love it. Yeah, Paranoid. Now, I gotta be honest. I love this album, but it is, and I'm not saying this to be counterculture, it's my least favorite of the first 6. Admittedly, that's because of the burnout factor. Half the songs are hits that get played on the radio a lot. Especially, and I've mentioned this station before, out of Philly, WMMR. WMMR, along with shit from the first Van Halen album and everything from the first 6 Zeppelin albums, they played the three big songs from this all the time. You know, they always played War Pigs and Paranoid and Iron Man like all the time on WMMR. And also Fairies Wear Boots they would play occasionally too. But that one wasn't quite as burned out as those other three songs. So those three songs were they're very burned out for me. Now, I can hear them obviously objectively and hear they're awesome songs, especially War Pigs. I love that song. But it's just a little burnt out for me. I do think that's a big factor to why this is my least favorite of the first six. I only got the vinyl for this actually like a year ago. And of course that made me reappreciate it. And yeah, it's awesome. It's still an awesome. Just because it's my sixth favorite Black Sabbath album doesn't mean it's not an awesome album, because that's how awesome Black Sabbath is. It's an awesome album. It's a masterpiece. Objectively, it is one of their best albums. I mean, I think the first six are all their best albums. But it's definitely the one I listen to the least of the first six. Planet Caravan is my favorite song from it. Love it. Never get bored of that song. It's all folky and has that pastoral kind of vibe I was talking about earlier. And it's kind of spacey and it's, you know, acoustic with the bongos or whatever. Pantera does an awesome cover of it. But this version is, you know, my favorite. And oh, man, what a great trippy vibe and something that they weren't even quite capable of on the first album. So you're hearing the evolution, like the band's evolving, and it's a great album. And it's one of the things that separates them from all their followers, you know, all their imitators years later, is that they could pull off a song like that. I think my second favorite track from this album is Hand of Doom. Oh man, great doom metal. If we got slap labels on shit, this is doom metal. Doesn't get more doom metal than this. It's doom's even in the title, Hand of Doom, and you got that bass and it kicks in with the chorus. Love that. And Fairies Wear Boots, great bluesy kind of stoner rock song. Love that song. It's a great album. It's a great album, but we all heard it a billion times. So let's move on. Master of Reality, 1971. Because, you know what, they took a break for like 2 months. And then they created a masterpiece. Let me tell you something about this album. This is my second favorite Black Sabbath album. A very strong second, too. I love this album. It's one of the greatest albums of all time. This, in some ways I'd say this is their heaviest album. You know, maybe their heaviest until Born Again. It's really heavy, and it's, I guess, their most doomy. It's very doomy. It's very heavy. This is when Tony Iommi start, you know, down tuning his guitar. His fingertips got sliced off in a factory, like some metal slicing thing cut off his fingertips. And what's more metal than that? And then he had to put these little things, these little tips that he would put, these fake, like, I don't know, out of wood or something or plastic. Tell me in the comment section. I'm curious what the material was that he would put to kind of replace his fingertips. But I know he wrapped something around it. Maybe it was just Band-Aids. I don't know. It was kind of painful for him to play guitar, but he did it anyway, because that's how goddamn awesome Tony Iommi is that even though he was in pain, he's like, God damn it, I have these riffs in me. I got these riffs in my soul, and they got to come out. So he played anyway, even though he's in a lot of pain. But finally, he got the idea before this album. It's like, maybe if I detune the guitars and loosen up the strings a little bit, it'll be a little easier on my fingers. And it was. So, and by doing that, he created really the sound of, still to this day, I would say, it's a very modern metal sound that you hear in all kinds of metal music, you know, from, you know, everything from, you know, doom metal, death metal, you know, the detune, grunge, you know, the whole detune thing. It got very popular in the 90s. And I think a lot of music in the 90s is very heavily influenced directly from Sabbath, and I think what they did on this and the next album, it lays the roadmap for so many kinds and so many subgenres of metal. And that detuned guitar, I mean, this is just as revolutionary in its own way as the first album, in my opinion. And I think it's stronger and more, the songs are stronger. And talk about Halloween vibe. Woo! It's dark and evil sounding. Like real evil, not like kiddie bullshit, pretend time, 80s evil time, which is fun. Nothing against the 80s, you know, satanic stuff. But this is like real dark shit. This kind of stuff, you know, this is the real deal. And, you know, the first song, though, is the stoner rock anthem, stoner metal anthem of all anthems, the Sweet Leaf, you know, with the cough. Kicks in with the monster riff. That riff, this sounds more like Godzilla, this riff, than even Blue Oyster Cult's Godzilla. And I love that song, but this song is like, comes in stomping. You know? Come on, what a badass riff, and then the way it builds and that cool when it gets faster later, and oh man, I never get tired of Sweet Leaf. I don't care how many times I hear this song. This song is one for the ages. After Forever, perhaps the greatest Christian rock song ever written. If you listen to the lyrics, you're like, whoa, what's going on with Sabbath? Do they worship Satan or Christ? What's going on? I think there's a battle going on, and that's what's great about it. It's very interesting. There's a battle between good and evil, and it's all going down here. It's going down and After Forever, fast and just badass. Love that. I love that you got little breakdowns, little folky embryos, and songs, and it's the folky pastoral thing that I was telling you about that I'm very into. That's great, and it sets up Children of the Grave, one of the greatest Sabbath songs. Children of the Grave, so heavy and badass, and I love that song. Lord of this World's great. Solitude, a little like Planet Caravan, kind of folky number, which for years I wasn't sure if that was Ozzy singing because he sounded very different. But and there's some debate on it, but I was reading, but it's been confirmed, at least from a few sites I read, that is indeed Ozzy. And that just shows you the range that Ozzy had when he was younger. I personally feel that Ozzy had a lot more range in the 70s, especially once he gets into the mid 70s, than he did later on. I mean, Ozzy always sounds cool. Even as an old guy, he sounds cool. But in the 70s, he was much more of a singer, in my opinion. He didn't just have the shtick that he just kind of sings everything the same way. Here, he had a lot of versatility. And just listen to Solitude. He sounds like a different guy. And it's a haunting song, a very darkly beautiful, haunting song. I love Solitude. And then Into the Void, my favorite song from the album, one of my favorite Sabbath songs, a classic. All diehards love this, as they should. One of the baddest riffs all time. And it's both funky and heavy and evil all at the same time, and all the changes. I mean, it's badass. How could you not love this album? Especially if you love metal. This, in my opinion, is arguably their most metal album. Master of Reality is a masterpiece for the ages. My second favorite Sabbath album. I love it. I love the shit out of it, and I'm going to always love the shit out of it. Okay, now we get to only 1972. Wait a minute. These guys have already got 4 albums in 3 years, and they're 4 of the greatest albums ever recorded. What were they doing? What kind of drugs were they doing? Well, I know what kind of drugs they were doing, and they were doing a lot of it on this album. Cocaine! That's right. Because this album, Volume 4, was originally going to be called Snowblind. And Snowblind is a track on this album, as many of you know. And Snowblind, that's the song you heard earlier, beginning of this video. And Snowblind is my very favorite Black Sabbath song. That's right, there you go. So Snowblind's my favorite Black Sabbath song. And Snowblind is the greatest cocaine song ever. It's about cocaine. In fact, he in the studio version, he just whispers it. You can almost barely hear it. I didn't actually hear it for years until I started paying attention. During the chorus, he whispers, cocaine. But live, when he does it live, if you listen to some of those live albums where Ozzy sings it, he just shouts it like a coked up bloke. He just shouts, cocaine, which is great. And that's fun. Although I kind of prefer the studio version where he whispers it because it's a little more mystical and evil, which I dig. The reason why this album was going to be called Snowblind, because this whole album was fueled by cocaine. They had this mansion in Beverly Hills, I believe, and they just did an insane amount of cocaine. And they recorded this album fueled by cocaine. And let me tell you something else, and I've said this before in a few of my videos. I love myself a cocaine album. Big fan of them. It's like a Fleetwood Mac's Tusk, David Bowie's Station to Station, also recorded in a mansion, I believe, in Beverly Hills, while he did a shitload of cocaine. So that's the place to do a lot of cocaine, in a mansion in Beverly Hills in the 1970s. That's like the ideal geography for cocaine, and it leads to really awesome albums. And every album Aerosmith recorded in the 70s, every album they recorded in the 70s a cocaine album, and that's all their best stuff. And this is my favorite Sabbath album, so I guess the cocaine was doing its job. Might hurt them a little bit later on, but right here, 1972, the cocaine was fucking delivering. And right out of the gate, with Wheels of Confusion. Man, underrated song. Even though it's the opener, I don't hear a lot of people talk about this song, but they should because it's awesome. But every song on this album is awesome. Wheels of Confusion, it's like two parts and it comes in and the sound. This is the thing about this whole album. Like Master of Reality, there's a consistent tone to the guitars and the sound, and it has that detuned thing, and it's really dark, and the guitars are heavy. But this album, it's kind of a transitional album because it's both like the heavier songs have that Master of Reality kind of sludgier, doomy sound, but they bring in this other side too, this progressive side, almost Beatle-esque progressive side, which they will explore more in the subsequent albums. So essentially, this is and this is why it's my favorite Sabbath album. Not only because a lot of my favorite Sabbath songs are on it, but to me, it's the perfect album because it bridges the two sides of Sabbath, the early doom stuff and the subsequent more progressive period. And you got a little bit of both of that on this album. And it's just amazing. You got Tomorrow's Dream, man, everything. The bass, the guitar, the riff, it's like Tony, his riffage just gets better and better. Like this guy just cannot just pick up a guitar and not come up with one of the most ass-kicking riffs of all time. Then there's Changes. Changes is my least favorite song on this album. It's just a little simple piano ballad and probably one of the most known songs on it. But I still do love it. It's a beautiful song. It's a beautiful song, haunting, and it comes just when it should. After you got those two great rockers, coming in for little piano ballads, like kind of like, whoa, like that's a surprise. It's a nice tonal shift. If it was like a movie, it's like, oh, I didn't expect that scene to happen or go down that way. And it's exciting. You like to hear things. You like to hear some curveballs. Then you got FX. FX is really just the opening for Supernaut. This is the thing. Sabbath had little slivers, like they essentially had introductions or interludes that they gave their own names to. Like they gave names to and made them like their own separate track. I believe I read somewhere or heard somewhere that this was because Warner Brothers wanted to make it look like there was more songs on the album because Sabbath songs were a little long and they wanted to make sure they felt like people wanted to get their money's worth. If they looked at it and they felt like they weren't getting enough songs, they might not buy the album. Like, hey, what is this, like an EP or something? So they told the band, like, call that something. At least that's what I read or heard. I don't know if it's truth, but it makes sense. But so FX as its own, yeah, it's kind of like, I'm never going to listen to FX, by itself. It's just a sound effect. And I guess if you counted this as a song, FX would be my least favorite song. But it's really just a sound effect. And it does create a little eeriness, a little discord before it kicks into one monster of a song, Supernaut. At this point, you thought, Tony Iommi, how many more great riffs can he throw at us? And then Supernaut, it's like, well, you know what? Hold my drink. And then there's great riffs after the first great riff, and then you got that drumming, Bill Ward's drumming, and you got the cool kind of tribal breakdown. And this song and Ozzy's vocals also have greatly improved already by this point. His singing's so much better than it was on the first two albums. In the first two albums, he was just kind of singing with the melody of the riff, and now he's not doing that anymore. He's singing against the melody, creating his own unique melodies, which are great. Ozzy might have not always wrote the lyrics, but he created these really great melodies, and his singing's just more high charged and higher pitch and just across the board stronger, and you hear it. And that's another thing I love about this album. Supernaut, definitely one of my favorite Sabbath songs of all time. But believe it or not, as great as Supernaut is, there are two songs I like even better, or I love even better, and they're the next two. That's like Snowblind, boom, bam, 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 man, majestic. Try not to use that word too much, because I used it a lot in my Dokken video, but this song deserves it. This song is majestic. Majestic, the greatest cocaine song ever written about cocaine, created by cocaine. It is cocaine. And it's, of course, on the greatest cocaine album of all time. fucking Volume 4, which more or less should be Snowblind, because that's what it is. The album's Snowblind, as far as I'm concerned. And this song is a masterpiece. It's amazing. I love the atmosphere. It's the kind of song that only could have been created in the 70s, you know? And that's one of the things I love about the 70s, you know? This is that kind of, it's a bridging of generations, you know? This is the song that brings together people that were like into Pink Floyd and Piper the Gates and psychedelic rock, but then foreshadows like the new wave of British heavy metal and all that stuff that's going to happen later. And this is the way station, you know, between this. It's like, and it feels like that. This song sounds like a way station between worlds and time. And this album's timeless. Like you feel like you're not in any time, you know. It's amazing. And then Cornucopia. Woo! Cornucopia. My second favorite song on the album, and my second favorite Sabbath song. I love Cornucopia, and it's so heavy. It starts off being like their heaviest song yet, like real heavy, even heavier than the shit on Master of Reality. And then it does that cool, I love that majestic breakdown it does, where it sounds a little like Snowblind for a bit, during the breakdown. I love it, and it's magical, this dark magic throughout this album, and on Cornucopia especially. And then we got another tonal shift, another different shade, a different color, Laguna Sunrise. Oh, Laguna Sunrise, beautiful. It's a haunting, melodic instrumental. It's kind of almost sounds like, I don't know, Renaissance fair music a little bit, but that's almost not giving it enough credit. It's not that corny. It's really wistful and beautiful. Makes you think of like standing out in the morning, watching like sunrise over an ocean, over mountains, and maybe there's a hazy castle in the distance. You know, it's impressionistic. It's beautiful. Tony's guitar playing on it's beautiful. And again, it shows a whole other side. And this is also another influence. It's like on thrash records and stuff, where they would have in Metallica especially would do stuff like this, where they would have the little acoustic guitar stuff before songs and little different shades, and all this comes from Sabbath. Like Sabbath was, you know, and I guess Zeppelin too to a degree, but Sabbath, that really idea of juxtaposing acoustic like beauty next to really heavy stuff. This is the blueprint, man. This is the blueprint. St. Vitus's Dance is a great kind of rock. Almost got a touch of a southern rock sound to it. I love it. Great song. Under the Sun, another great song, masterpiece. Doomy, great lyrics. Love Under the Sun. Great way to end this masterpiece of an album. My favorite Black Sabbath album. It's the album that got me to finally appreciate the band all those years ago, back in the late 90s. It's the album that helped me make the transition from a punk-ass headbanger to a connoisseur of music, you know, just music in general. And that's Black Sabbath transcends just heavy metal. It's just great music. And what else can I say? It's Volume 4. Come on, get with it. Now anyway, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, 1973. They ain't stopping. Another year, another album. Look at that album cover. Man, my favorite Black Sabbath album cover. You got the naked ladies in the bed, the naked devil women, and they're attacking this guy, and that really cool headboard. I like to have a headboard like that. And man, it doesn't get cooler than that. Funny thing though is, as awesome and badass and as metal as this album cover is, this album is really the album where they start getting progressive. You know, they're taking it. There are some metal moments, and especially with the opening title track. But even on that opening title track, well, let's just talk about it. Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, one of the greatest Sabbath songs ever. Never get burned out by this song. I love Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. Comes out of the gate again. Another amazing classic Iommi riff. God. Man, how badass is that riff? It's like, it doesn't get more metal than that riff. But and Ozzy's singing. If anything, his singing's getting even stronger, even higher. He's building to something. What's he building to? What's this all leading to? I don't know. Maybe we'll talk about it in the next album. But man, he sounds amazing. And again, coming up with his own melody in counter to the awesome riff. And it's awesome. But then they throw you curveballs left and right. The chorus, the guitars get clean sounding, and suddenly it's very melodic and almost Beatlesque. Then they get heavy again. Then they get really heavy for that grunge kind of mosh pit part. Like they're creating like a mosh pit sound with that breakdown. And oh man, it's so badass. And just all these different shades. And it's like, in a lot of ways, this is like the ultimate Black Sabbath song because it just kind of does it all. Like everything that Sabbath does, everything that Sabbath did in the 70s, they do in this goddamn song. And I love it. A National Acrobat, great song, great kind of doomy, mid-tempo Sabbath song, really dark sounding. I love it. Fluff, I'd say my least favorite song on the album, but it's cool. It's a different shade. This is the only thing about this album. I feel like Fluff should not be, it definitely shouldn't be the third song on this album. It's not like Changes where because it's an instrumental. If anything, it should be where Laguna Sunrise was. It should be like the second or third to last song on the album because you're just busy rocking. You don't want to hear a song like Fluff, and it's a nice little ditty. Shows the other side, but I don't know about that. That's all I gotta say. I don't know about that. If they're gonna do Fluff, I feel like it should be someplace else. Sabracadabra, rock and roll. This is like a little more rock and rolly that you expect from Sabbath, and just really catchy. It's got boogie to it. I guess that's what I'm getting to. It's a boogie song, and the riff's great, and Ozzy sounds so badass, and it's just got a swerve to it and its groove. I love the breakdown with that badass 70s synthesizer kind of comes in, and this is like their party song. Like it's a party song, and it shows another side of Sabbath. And I think lyrically, it's just about being in love, But musically, it sounds like fucking. Killing Yourself to Live. Probably my second favorite song on this album. I say the title track's my favorite. But Killing Yourself to Live, great song. Love that guitar sound that Tony has, especially during the verses. Who Are You? And this is what I said. This is my fifth favorite Black Sabbath album. I know a lot of people put it up a little higher than me. And when I was younger, this was probably my second favorite Black Sabbath album after Volume 4. But as I've gotten older, it's dropped a little bit. The first album and another album that we might not gotten to yet have grown in my estimation, and this album has kind of dropped a bit. I still give it an edge over Paranoid. It doesn't have that same burnout factor, and it's a great album. I hate to sound like I'm dogging this. It's just that there's a couple songs like Fluff and two songs here, Who Are You and Looking for Today, which I think by Sabbath standards, by 70s Ozzy era Sabbath standards, are just all right. They're cool, but they're just kind of filler. They're good filler. I guess they're killer filler, but they're not quite up to par with the other tracks. And I don't think this album is quite as consistent as the 4 albums before it. But it's still awesome. So I don't want to sound like I'm dogging it. But yeah, I think Who Are You and Looking for Today are just kind of all right. But then, man, it gets great again. Spiral Architect, woo! One of the best Sabbath songs. And this is really progressive and different. It sounds almost more kind of like the Who meets the Beatles. It's kind of rocking, but it has strings on it and orchestration, and it's epic, and it's an amazing song. It's a great way to end this album, and it just shows you the range that Sabbath has and their ambition, and I love it. It's great. And then Sabbath, oh my God, what happened? They took a year off. No album in 74. What happened? But it's all right. They come back again in 1975 with Sabotage. Sabotage is my third favorite Sabbath album, and it's a strong third. It's like if Master of Reality is right on Volume 4's ass, well, this is then right on Master of Reality's ass. It's a strong third, and this is one that has grown on me over the years. And objectively, there's a case. I'm always going to love Volume 4 and Master of Reality. They're pretty locked in there as my top 2. But this, I can say this is their best production. I feel this is the best sounding Sabbath album. And I think it's Ozzy's greatest vocals. So this definitely tops for that. It's only because I kind of prefer the songs on the Volume 4 Master of Reality. But, man, these songs are pretty awesome too. And this does have, I think, the greatest Sabbath production and Ozzy's vocals. And I'm surprised, I know diehard Sabbath fans and metalheads do love this album, and it's very well revered. But To casual Sabbath fans, I'm surprised it's not a bigger album. Like I feel this should be. I feel like the casual Sabbath fans, it is a little more about the first four albums, and I feel like Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, and especially this album, Sabotage, should, they're on that level, and they kind of should be considered along with that. And come on, Hole in the Sky could be the greatest Sabbath opener. Let me think. Well, this or Sweet Leaf. This or Sweet Leaf are the two best openers. But man, Hole in the Sky just comes in crushing. You hear just a little bit of that like band in the studio sound, which I love. Like when you hear a little bit of that, and then it comes crushing in with that one. Could be Iommi's greatest riff yet. 6 albums in, and he's still knocking out some of his greatest riffs ever. And Ozzy sounds possessed. Like I said, easily his best vocals ever. His solo career, as much as I love some of those 80s albums, he never came as close to sound as good as he sounds on this album. This album, he sounds possessed. He's hitting notes that he never hit before or after. This is peak Ozzy. He sounds amazing, and he sounds possessed, and he just sounds like the baddest, craziest, cosmic, fucked up motherfucker in the world, in the universe. In the cosmos, when we talk about universe, it then goes into symptom of a universe. And I know, this Don't Start, was it Too Late? Yeah, Too Late in parentheses. Yeah, that's a little acoustic thing, like I said, but that's really just an interlude. I don't know, is it the end of Hole in the Sky, or is it the beginning of Symptom of the Universe? So, raises a metaphysical question. Is it the beginning of something or the end of something? Or can it be both? Maybe. Maybe that's why it's got 2 titles. Maybe Don't Start is oh, I see what they did there. Hey, I'm figuring something out right now for the first time in my life. It's ironic. They're saying Don't Start. Oh, too late. We already started. So in a sense, it's saying let's take a breather between this heavy song and the next even heavier song, and the music, like, fuck it. We're just going in. We're just gonna launch in. I get it. That's ingenious. Goddamn, Black Sabbath. They're smart. They're smart. Anyway, science. So here we go. Don't Start, Too Late. Little cool acoustic thing. But then, boom. Symptom of the Universe. A lot of people say this, and a lot of people are right. This song created thrash metal. That's right. First they create heavy metal. They create doom metal. I think they created grunge, too, with those first 4 albums. And now they created another metal subgenre. I mean, this is like the first thrash song. I mean, it's a little bit of you could say maybe Paranoid. The title track was a little thrashy. But man, this is like full-on thrash. It just, the sound of the guitar, the tone, even the cosmic lyrics, everything is awesome about this song. Ozzy singing's out of this world. It's great. And this is why Black Sabbath is in a whole other class. Because as thrashy and heavy as this song is, it then goes into this hippie jam folky part. That's awesome, and just as awesome in its own way, And it's just this groovy kind of just hanging around, in a nice hazy, like, doing little drugs, but just kind of chilling vibe, to get so heavy and then be so chill. And they don't miss a beat. They don't miss a beat. They just go into one thing and go out another. Don't Start, Too Late. Sabbath is operating on another level. And you're like, God damn, Hole in the Sky, Symptom of the Universe. What more can you throw at me, Sabbath? What more can you do? And then they throw Megalomania, which is my favorite song on the album. And I'd say this is probably, this is my 3rd favorite Sabbath song, period. And it's definitely my favorite from this album. It's epic, beyond epic. It starts off kind of dark and eerie, like a gothic haunted house, It's got, and Ozzy comes in, and I love that effect where you hear a little bit of his vocal, line, then he comes and sings the verse, and oh man, I love the atmosphere, the vibe, and it just keeps building. And then, the first part of the song stops, and then this really badass, another Tony Iommi badass riff comes in. It starts getting heavy and rocking. One of the greatest Sabbath songs ever, and just riff on top of riff and music, and it's a journey, And Zeppelin did this too, where you just go on a musical journey, and no matter how many times I listen to it, it always has that excitement of a journey. this dark journey, but it's also got beauty too. It's darkness and beauty, and it's all wrapped up in this haunted masterpiece. I love Megalomania. And I will say this: if side two, which I do love, but if side two was as strong as side one, this would be the greatest Sabbath album. Because I think tracks 1, 2, 3, and 4 all put together, that side is the greatest triumph of Black Sabbath. I think that side is the best thing they ever did. I think musically, production, singing, vocals, lyrics, that's it. That's Sabbath at their peak. And the second side, I do think is stronger than Sabbath Bloody Sabbath's second side, but it's not quite the masterwork that the first side is. And as a result, that's another reason why I give Volume 4 and Master Reality a slight edge, because I feel that album is very consistent all the way through. That being said, side 2 is nothing to sneeze at. I'm definitely not kicking it out of bed. The Thrill of It All, especially not The Thrill of It All, that's actually my second. Especially not The Thrill of It All. That's actually my second favorite song on this album. I love The Thrill of It all. Man, just it's just so unique. It only sounds like Sabbath. And maybe years later, some bands that they inspired, like Witchfinder General, would have songs that sounded a little like this. But man, The Thrill of It All, it's stoner, hard rock, it's kind of trippy, it's heavy, it's kind of everything all at once. And I love the vibe, the sound. Tony Iommi, he does great soloing and the riffs, and man, one of the greatest Sabbath songs. I love The Thrill of It All. A very underrated track. More people should talk about it. But then we have the next two tracks, which I think bring it down just a little bit. And I like Super Czar. Super Czar is cool. It's kind of a weird instrumental with a choral and strings and stuff. It's cool. I like it better than Fluff, and it's placed well. This is a good place for it. But after the first 5 songs, it's like it does feel a little bit of a letdown, because it was just so awesome before, and this just feels a little more like something you would expect from the last album's second side. And then the weakest song on the album, in my opinion, Am I Going Insane? Am I Going Insane? I like it. I don't dislike the song, but I don't love it. It's all right. It's a little poppy. It's a little different. It's a little Beatle-esque. It's got the synthesizer. It's cool, and it's great to see the other sides of Sabbath. I just feel like, again, just because the first 5 songs are so awesome, that this is like the one time I almost want them to not be so eclectic. It's just like, just keep doing the shit you were doing before because it was so perfect. But still, it's a cool little song. And then the final track, well, they reclaim the album with the final track, The Wit. Am I pronouncing that right? The Wit? It's W-R-I-T, Writ. I don't know. That's how I would pronounce it. I don't always pronounce shit right. I'm from Philly. What can I do? The Writ. It's some British slang term. I think it has something to do with some legal term or something. Because this song, actually the lyrics written by Ozzy, who normally didn't write the lyrics, and they're really good lyrics. But it was about, they were suing their manager. I think it was their manager. Let me look. Yeah, their first manager. He was suing them, and he was suing the band, and yeah, they had some legal problems. So this song was about the frustrations of that. And man, this is an epic track. The way you hear that little bass, it's, that really cool bass getting kind of trippy, and it comes in like a punch to the goddamn motherfucking face. So heavy. And Ozzy's vocals, he's possessed. What evil is in Ozzy? He sounds awesome, and it is so badass and so heavy. Bands, I don't care, all these black metal, poser boys that put on little scary makeup and boo-hoo-hoo. Man, you never sound as tough as this bloke. Never as evil and possessed and dark. This blows away all the music it inspired. I don't care how heavy and what kind of Cookie Monster voice you put on. You're never going to sound as badass as Ozzy coming in with Sabbath with that riff. I'm sorry. There's a difference between pretending you're spooky and just being BAM. It's just a different thing. There's boys pretending to be men, and there's men being monsters. And that's this song. Men Being Monsters. It's awesome. I love it. And then they're so confident in their heaviness, as Sabbath always is, that they don't mind getting and light and fruity and throwing in harpsichords and stuff. It's great. I love it. All the different shades, and it's all here. It's one of Sabbath's greatest songs. It's my third favorite song on the album, The Writ, if I am pronouncing it right. And God damn it, I love it. And this completes the great first 6 Sabbath albums. To me, that is the standard. The gold Black Sabbath standard are the first 6 albums, and Sabotage is my third favorite Sabbath album. I love it. But we got 2 more albums to talk about, so let's do it. 1976, Technical Ecstasy. Now, this is the thing about Technical Ecstasy. It's a good album. I like it. Don't love it. It's my least favorite of the first 8 and of the Ozzy era. And, you know, I know some people really like it and think it's underrated. And then I know other people hate it and think it's the worst Ozzy era Sabbath album. And I guess I'm with those people. I don't hate it, but I do agree, in my opinion, it's the weakest of the Ozzy era Sabbath albums. It's my least favorite of the first 8 albums. But I do like it, and it has grown on me a bit. Not so much that it's not my least favorite Ozzy era Sabbath album, but it's just, whatever they were building to and they reached in Sabotage, there you can hear that there's a little stagnation now coming in. Backstreet Kids, good riff. It's a good Sabbath tune. Sounds a little like, could have been a filler track on Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. It's a decent song. The next song's better. I like You Won't Change Me. That's doomy, and that's cool, and that's got the creepy little synths. I like that song, and that song's grown on me. It's all right. The ballad, piano ballad, Bill Ward sings, and this was the mid-'70s where drummers would sing ballads on albums. So, I guess that was kind of a 70s thing to do. And it's a nice song. It's a nice little pretty song. Doesn't sound anything like Black Sabbath, but hey, it's a pretty little song. I dig it. Gypsy, that's a cool song. It's all right. All Moving Parts, Stand Still, in parentheses. That's my second favorite song on the album. That's cool. That's a song that's really grown on me in recent years. That's got dark, kind of funky. It's got kind of a funky groove, but still kind of heavy. That's a cool song. Rock and Roll Doctor is a very rock and rolly, the most rock and rolly song they ever did for Ozzy. Very generic, nothing special about it. Don't hate it, but don't love it. It's just kind of, okay, you did a 70s style rock and roll song. She's Gone, my least favorite song on the album. A really syrupy kind of weak ballad, in my opinion. Sorry if you like the song, but I think this is the worst thing they did with Ozzy. The worst thing they did for Ozzy in the 70s. I'm not a fan of She's Gone. I think it's kind of maudlin and syrupy, and it's just, it ain't no changes. It's definitely ain't no Isolation. It's definitely no Planet Caravan. And hell, it's not even It's All Right. I think that's better than this. So I don't like that. But Dirty Women, love Dirty Women, my favorite song on the album. They still, this is a song that they would play live more than any other song from this album. And there's a reason for it. Dirty Women's really catchy. It's got a badass Tony Iommi riff. He still can knock out a few bad riffs here and there. Not as much as he was doing with the first 6 albums, but, he's got a few still in his back pocket. And this is great, and I love the changes of it. And then, it's about dirty women, so that's great. And it's a great way to end the album. And when you hear it, you kind of wish the whole album was like that. But it's all right. It's a good album, not great. I mean, one of them had to be my least favorite, so I guess that's what Technical Ecstasy is all about. That's why it exists. It exists to be my least favorite Ozzy era Sabbath album. And then we get to the final one, 1978, Never Say Die. And this is another one. Some people say it's Technical Ecstasy, so others say it's this one. I find it's usually Technical Ecstasy that most people say is the worst Ozzy era Sabbath album from the 70s. Some people say it's this. It's my second least favorite, so it's definitely not the comeback that they need after Technical Ecstasy, but I do like it better in Technical Ecstasy, and I definitely listen to it more than Technical Ecstasy. It's definitely a step up from that. It's a little closer to, I would say, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath quality level. It misses that album by just a little bit, but, it's my 7th favorite Ozzy era Black Sabbath album. Title track's great. Great opener. Really catchy, fun. You can hear maybe a little bit of punk influence here. It is 1978, and it's a little more straightforward and fast. And Ozzy singing sounds pretty good, and it's just a catchy song. It's got some good riffage. I really like it. It's kind of fun. It's kind of a fun song, and I like it. Johnny Blade. Johnny Blade sounds to me almost a little like, it sounds a little bit like Mr. Crowley, or like something from the early 80s, solo Ozzy. So it almost sounds like a foreshadowing. Johnny Blade's alright. It's got lots of synthesizers, and it's a decent track. I like it. It's not bad. Junior's Eyes. Woo! Now that song, this song, Junior's Eyes, I love. My favorite song on the album. Easily. Easily. And it's one of my favorite Sabbath songs. It definitely would break my top 10. Maybe even my top 5. Definitely my top 10. It's one of my favorite, all-time favorite Sabbath songs. I believe it had something to do with Ozzy's father passing on, from what I heard. Man, this song, it's just, it comes on with the drums, great drums, the bass, Geezer's funky, groovy bass, and it just has a swagger to it. It just has a swagger. Ozzy comes on, and then when it kicks into that chorus is so hooky. It's got such a great hook, such a great melody, as good as any other great classic Sabbath song. To me, this should be a bigger song that more people talk about, and it should have been a single, I think, even. It's great. It's the highlight of the album. I love Junior's Eyes, one of my favorite Sabbath songs, and Hard Road, just all right. Kind of an all-right filler track. Again, it's not a little something like a filler track from Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. Same with Shockwave. Again, another decent but just kind of filler track. Air Dance. Air Dance. I used to think this song was kind of pretentious, and I couldn't get into it. Even when I was into funk and jazz, even when I first listened to them, like I said, I was listening to a lot of jazz at the time, but I didn't really hear Sabbath get this jazzy. It's like, even I was like, don't get this jazzy, Sabbath. Say that for jazz musicians. But I have a different opinion now. Over the years, this song has really grown a lot on me, and I think it's beautiful, and I think it's one of their best songs. It's my second favorite song on this album. I love Air Dance. I think they nail it. It's a jazz rock fusion, and it's great. It's as great as any jazz rock fusion Pink Floyd ever tried, or a lot of progressive rock bands. I love it, and I love the piano and the pageantry to the song, and the different parts, and the sound of Tony's guitars, and the instrumentation. I think Ozzy does a great job singing it. I think it's a masterful song. It just, again, puts Sabbath up at that they were a class act, that they could pull off a song like this. I love it. Second favorite song on the album. Over to You. Another one, like I said, just kind of filler track. Breakouts and instrumental, not so hot. Swinging the Chain, and with Bill Ward sings, kind of a bluesy, kind of hard rock, standard 70s sounding hard rock song. It's all right, but not great. I tell you, this is the thing. It's mainly because of Never Say Die, Junior's Eyes, and Air Dance that this album is elevated over Technical Ecstasy. Otherwise, Technical Ecstasy might have been a little bit better. But those three songs I love more than anything on Technical Ecstasy, and that's what gives this album an edge. But it's still, I would say, it's my second least favorite Ozzy Era album. So, and that's it. And then Ozzy was like, fuck you. And they were like, fuck you, Ozzy. And Ozzy went solo, and they got Ronnie James Dio. And I will talk about those albums another time when we do part 2. Maybe next Halloween. We'll see. Maybe sooner. We'll see how it goes. But that's it for Ozzy. I will just to recap, and I'm going to do a little countdown for you now. So number 8, in my opinion, this is my opinion, they're all great to varying degrees. And the first 6, I mean, anyone that thinks the first 6 Sabbath albums, any of those albums you think is their best album, you're right, because they're all great. But in my opinion, as of now, Halloween time in 2020, I would say at number 8, I would say it's Technical Ecstasy. Number 7, Never Say Die. Number 6, Paranoid. Number 5, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. Number 4, the debut, the first Black Sabbath album, Black Sabbath. That's right, my 4th favorite Black Sabbath album. Number 3, Sabotage. Number 2, Master of Reality. And number 1, Volume 4, Cocaine, Snowblind. Bam! Greatest Sabbath album ever, in my opinion. My favorite. That's right, Volume 4. So there you go. That's my ranking of the Ozzy era, the 70s Ozzy era Black Sabbath albums. And I'm tipsy now. I had fun. I hope you had fun too. Happy Halloween and rock on.